We've all heard the legendary Jack Kirby saying, "Don't fall in love with comics, kid, that'll only break your heart." It turns out he was not the only comic book legend that ended up feeling that way about comic books and Marvel comics and all the things that could happen within a comic book industry. One of those was Herb Trimpe, the legendary comic book artist from Marvel Comics. He had probably the longest run in Hulk history. I think he did 11 years total on Hulk. I think he did a 7-year stint and then a 4-year stint. Pretty much synonymous with the Hulk character. If you read Silver Age, Incredible Hulk books, you're likely going to be seeing Herb Trimpe. Obviously created a lot of great things. I believe he's the first man to introduce Doc Savage in Hulk. I believe he also introduced characters like Captain Britain, Brian Braddock, and stuff. Now, the biggest thing that people might know him for now is he's the first man to ever illustrate Wolverine in a comic book. I believe in Incredible Hulk 180, then obviously the first real appearance in 181. Now, he doesn't get credited as a co-creator of Wolverine, although under the new rules and the way that Roy Thomas is being treated, maybe Herb Trimpe should be treated as a co-creator of the Wolverine character. And this man had a legendary 3 decades-long career at Marvel Comics after serving his country in the Vietnam War. And then guess what Marvel Comics did to the man? When he was no longer useful, they kicked him to the curb. Now, he did get angry. He did get upset. He did feel betrayed, but he also realized that he had responsibilities and he had to do something with his life and kind of move on. And he actually went out there in his 50s, late 50s. He actually went out there, got a college degree, got his education, and became basically an art teacher in schools and stuff like that. It's a really cool story. And there's an article that came out, I believe it's from the New York Times in the year 2000, titled "Old Superheroes Never Die, They Join the Real World." And a shout out to Graham Nolan, who I think reposted this. I guess he retweets it every year, talking about the way the comic book industry will chew you up and spit you out. No matter how successful you've been, no matter what you've actually contributed to the company, they will eventually get tired of you. And what are you going to do with your life then? Are you going to be full of vengeance? Are you going to be full of anger and betrayal? Or are you going to be able to move on with your life? And this man was able to do it in his late 50s. And we see lots of comic book pros today asking for sandwich money, asking for help with the rent because they can't make ends meet within comic books, but they aren't looking outside of comic books for some reason. They're not going, you know what? This isn't stable. This isn't steady. And even if I am successful, even if I have a career as legendary as Herb Trimpe or Jack Kirby, they're going to use me up and spit me out just like everybody else. And I don't understand why a lot of people in today's time don't have the resiliency of a Herb Trimpe. And I don't believe this story is only useful for comic book pros that are struggling with the reality of the comic book industry. I don't know if you've noticed this. There's a lot of people that are really freaked out right now because there's contraction going on, not just in comic books, just in entertainment in general. And comic books are definitely going to be taking a hit on that. And there are going to be people that are looking for jobs that have had writing experience, successful writing experience. They might make their way into comic books. It might even be harder in comic books as a lot of these other jobs and opportunities start drying up as well. And it really illustrates a lot of really interesting things from Herb Trimpe's perspective. You'll notice when he talks about the problems with the industry and why Marvel Comics are struggling at the time, it's a lot of the same problems that we have now, but they're only worse and have been exacerbated over time. Now, I'm going to talk about this article, and he also has a lot of diary inputs of what he's feeling and what he's going through at the time. I think it spans 1995 all the way to like 98. It might go into 99, but I think it's 98. I'm going to concentrate on 1995. We can't cover all of it, but there will be a link to the article in the video description if you would like to read up on all the things that Herb Trimpe went through and what he was thinking and what he was feeling and what he overcame and how he was able to find that second career, which didn't last all that long. I don't think he was a school teacher for a very long time, but the man said, hey, I need to be able to do something else because this isn't sustainable at this point. Starting out the article, he states, in 1996, after 29 years as an artist for Marvel Comics, I got fired, 56 years old, 2 children, still in college and no job. Things had started to get shaky 2 years before. The American comic industry was taking hits from changing taste in their youth market. Teenage boys had plenty of other entertainment options, mostly electronic, and Marvel couldn't seem to lure the general population. Never mind that in Japan, comic books sell in the millions to all ages. It also didn't help that Ronald Perlman's acquisition binge overextended the company and that Marvel flooded the market with spin-offs, endless #1 issues, devaluing the collections of the faithful. So these are not new issues that Marvel Comics and DC Comics have not addressed. They've only exacerbated the problems over time. It's absolutely crazy the way this has happened. And even by the year 1996, Marvel Comics were already finding themselves competing with electronic entertainment, mostly video games at the time. Obviously now you've got computers and the interwebs and all that kind of stuff out there as well. It's a more competitive environment than ever, and that's why we're seeing a lot of the struggles between Marvel and DC. And it's crazy that in 1996, almost 30 years ago, Marvel were experiencing the exact same thing, and they never really were able to address it or solve the issue. They just made it worse over time. Next, he states, I had joined Marvel in 1967 after a year in Vietnam and 3 years as a student at the School of Visual Arts in Manhattan. Stan Lee, then the editor-in-chief, hired me as a production assistant. I would draw comics, including The Incredible Hulk and the Fantastic Four, over the next 3 decades. The last 2 from my home studio, 120 miles from Manhattan, where I live with my wife, Linda Fite, a writer I met at Marvel. So this just wasn't some dude that showed up and just expected a job. This is a man that had real life experience. I believe he was a weatherman in the United States Air Force and obviously went to Vietnam. And you might say, hey, Wes, it's a weatherman. He wasn't doing nothing. No, trust me. As somebody that worked in intelligence and that was in Afghanistan and we had to plan out missions. Now, I'm not saying the weather guys are going out and performing the missions, but they are absolutely vital to mission planning and stuff like that. He would have been a part of all that stuff. And certainly being in country in Vietnam, his life would have been in danger just being there. Paid his dues for his country, went in there and paid his dues with Marvel Comics. He didn't get hired as an artist. He got hired as a production assistant. He would have been going in there and helping people out, maybe when they were falling behind or maybe cleaning something up when somebody was on vacation and stuff like that. Eventually, he showed the proficiency and ability to be a great artist. He got his big break, obviously, on Incredible Hulk being the really big one. And he worked on a lot of different characters in comic books over the years, basically on all the major Marvel characters over a 30-year period. This dude literally contributed to the safety of his fellow Americans and the success of the Incredible Hulk character and other characters throughout Marvel Comics for 30 freaking years. He paid his dues. He got his way in the door. He gave them everything that he had, and they still spit him out when he wasn't useful to them anymore. Obviously, Marvel Comics would have been going through a renaissance when it came to artistic talent. Your Todd McFarlanes, your Mark Silvestris, your Rob Liefelds, your Will Portacios, and all those guys would have been the influx. And all of a sudden, Herb Trimpe is old news. He's not exciting anymore. It's time to kick him to the curb. And that's basically what happened. And what's next in the article, like I said, it's like 3 years worth of diary entries and all the stuff that he went through. And I thought there's a lot of interesting stuff in here. Starting in 1995, January 26th, rumors, and more rumors. Marie, and my assumption is the Marie that he's speaking about right there is comic book legend Marie Severin, says she's having the same trouble I am, getting just the odd coloring job, no substantial work at all. The checks keep coming, but this is getting weirder and weirder. It helps to talk to someone in the same boat. On February 3rd, I feel like I'm turning into somebody else. February 7th, freak out in the AM, anxiety, I think. Feel dizzy and panicky. The world is closing in. Shaken and sullen the rest of the morning. Chicken Scratch seems hopeless. And Chicken Scratch is basically a comic strip I think he was working on at the time. I don't think it ever really worked out for him. But he was already looking for something else, another avenue to apply his trade, because he could see the writing on the wall with Marvel Comics. Like, it wasn't going to work out for him. And, I haven't been through this exact experience that he's talking about with Marvel. I was in the military and I had dropped my papers and everything, but I remember I was having these massive panic attacks for like the last, 18 months I was in the military. By that point, I had gotten married to my wife here in the Philippines. We had our first son. The plan was for them to actually join me in the United States. I was going to stay in the Air Force for a couple more years. At least that was the plan at the time. And just being apart was driving me nuts. And I was having all these crazy things. I thought I was having multiple heart attacks. Ended up having to have like an entire heart checkup. They put like weird dye in me and were checking out how I was pumping and everything, because I literally thought I was dying. I was under so much stress. So I can literally understand how he's feeling with that dizziness, that panic, like that weird thing that you're like, I don't know why this is here, but it's ever present. And I don't understand why this is happening. It was really freaking me out. And it turned out I was just under an ungodly amount of stress at the time, being separated from my family, being a new father, trying to get things ready. And I had already got the paperwork in. And eventually I was just like, babe, I cannot do this. I know that we've already submitted everything, but this is not working out for me. I want to put in my paperwork to retire. I was already within my window. I just want to retire and go to the Philippines, and we'll see what happens there. And thankfully, my wife was very supportive at the time. But I know that it was taking a toll on her, too, because she could tell Like there was something really wrong with me. I wasn't like acting like myself. And there was nothing I could do to like fix it. It was the most helpless feeling in the world. So I can feel, I know exactly, well, not exactly, but I have a real good feeling what Herb Trimpe was going through in early 1995. On April 2nd, he states, "Where's Marvel?" Linda says, "Call." Marie says, "No, why bother? Let it ride. My order of battle is just about wrapped up. The list of projects I laid out in November to work on. I don't know exactly what to do. Worked in the yard with Linda in the afternoon. On May 1st, lo and behold, I got a call from Marvel, a message about a job on X Factor breakdowns. 6 months of nothing, and now this, a one-shot job of loose pencil drawings. The call is upsetting. On May 13th, well, the wait is over. Today it came via Federal Express. I got fired by mail effective June 8th. No warning, no phone call. The letter was delivered with another package that I was expecting from Marvel. You couldn't tell what it was going to be by the envelope. A stealth termination. Opened it, bang, gotcha, ha. I've been waiting a long time, and still they caught me off guard." On May 17th, he writes, "Got a package from Marvel today, a pile of termination of agreement paperwork. I'm supposed to sign forms swearing that I won't talk trash about Marvel, won't reveal any superhero secret identities, won't say anything mean about Stan Lee, won't make a fuss, and other legal mumbo jumbo. If I don't sign, I don't get termination benefits." And I can't like imagine like the feeling there where you're waiting for it to happen. You know, your days are probably numbered, but you don't know when it's going to happen. You receive a package or an envelope that you were expecting, and it's actually got your termination paperwork in there. He probably expected a call from Stan Lee or the editor-in-chief or somebody within the Marvel Comics like C-suite, an executive, to say, "Hey, Herb, we really do appreciate these 30 years that you've given us. Unfortunately, you know, we're not going to be able to continue on this, but you are a legend and we really appreciate you." Nothing like that. Just fucking fired him as cold as you could possibly fire anybody. Like he had never done anything for the health and longevity of Marvel Comics and their characters and the love for the characters and helping them grow through the Silver Age and stuff like that. Herb fucking Trimpe, who had done amazing work, had created new brands throughout Marvel Comics and made them profitable, was the first guy to illustrate Wolverine, basically just gets executed via FedEx, not even a goddamn phone call. And that's the industry that this is. That's why there's no loyalty among the creators to the publishers, because there's no loyalty from the publishers to the creators. This is what they do to you. And at this point, the guy knew why Marvel Comics was struggling. It wasn't because the sales were incredibly low. The sales were perfectly fine. There's no reason that all these things had to happen. But the guy in charge of Marvel was like, "We need to buy Fleer and get into the freaking sports card business or something," and all these stupid things. And it's all about expansion, expansion, expansion. I don't know if you've heard this with another company called IDW. They didn't even go for something as cheap as freaking baseball cards. They decided they were going to be a fucking movie studio and basically ruined all their finances, ended up having to lay off lots and lots of people that have happened over the last 3 or 4 years at this point. Because you have a lot of people that are completely irresponsible and they don't think comic books are good enough. They're better than comic books. Comic books are lowbrow entertainment. It's for rednecks. It's for little kids. And they aren't proud to be in the comic book industry. So they're always trying to make the comic book industry something that it isn't, something that they wish it could be. And great people like Herb Trimpe ended up being the sacrificial lambs for that. I don't know, greed is kind of a word that comes to mind in that one. The last set of entries that I'll talk about from Herb Trimpe in his diary start on December 15th. "I am so grouchy with Linda. Criticize her for every little thing. She drives me nuts with her implacable, calm, and what me worry demeanor. I think she's in denial." On December 18th, "Got next semester's courses lined up, including a couple study groups in New Paltz. I like being in class, so I'm looking forward to that. Even driving across the mountain in January and February." On December 28th, "Marvel is bankrupt. I wonder what Stan thinks. It's a shame that Perlman did that to the company. Corporate suits. As Flo always says, Herb, they just don't care. Don't you get it?" And my assumption there is that he's talking about Flo Steinberg, who would have been like the first lady of independent comic books in the United States. She had been, I think, a secretary for Stan Lee into the late 60s at that point. So she would have been gone from the company for at least 30 years when he's quoting her there and talking about what happened. But obviously that resonated with her, and she could see it all the way back in the late 60s. They just don't care. And that's what happened to Herb Trimpe. And, and obviously when you're going through those major life changes, it can be very difficult. And, all of a sudden you're grouchy with your wife. You're never like that. Or maybe you're raising your voice with your kids when you normally wouldn't have. Or things that had never bothered you now because you're not like the same person anymore. You're just in a weird place where nothing's working out. And what are you going to do? Well, you could just put your head down and sit there and feel bad for yourself and have life run over you like a tornado through a trailer park. Or you can pick your head up and say, you know what? I gave them 30 years of my life and I did something great and they don't appreciate it, but it's time for me to move on. And the guy went out there and got his education. He got his degree. He went out there and got his certifications. He went out there and did everything that he had to do to be certified by the state, and eventually ended up becoming a school teacher and left comic books behind just for a little bit. He did come back eventually, but it's that kind of resiliency, knowing that you've been fucked over, knowing that it's not going to work out, that the opportunities that should be there aren't there anymore, but also knowing you're worth more than just being pissed off all the time, that you're going to have to move on with your life, and you do have responsibilities to your family, to your wife, to your kids, and going out there and finding a new path. And that's what Herb Trimpe was able to do. There's a lot of things that we can learn from this article and these set of diary entries. That it's difficult to go through hard times. People will fuck you over. Comic book industry especially will absolutely screw you over in the end. But in the end, you got to keep your head up high, and you need to move on with your life when you realize there's nothing left, in that part of your life anymore. And there's a lot of people that never made it in comic books that don't have a legendary impact on anything. I'm talking about your Danny Lores and your Joe Glasses and your Mags Visagios out there that never made an impact in comic books whatsoever, but for some reason feel completely entitled for people to just give them money for nothing. Go and do the Herb Trimpe thing. Figure out what you might want to do for the rest of your life and go get yourself a goddamn job, because that's what it means to be an adult. But the thing that he had that none of them had, he had life experience. He actually had to go through hard times. He was in the Air Force. He was a weatherman. He was in the Vietnam War. This man knew what it was like to be in the worst of the worst shit imaginable. And that, yes, being fired by Marvel did suck. Not being able to pay your bills, not ideal. But you do have to move on with your life. You have to be resilient. You have to be able to stand up to hard times and make them right again. No one's going to do it for you. You have to go out there and make your own destiny. And that's what Herb Trimpe did. And I think that's why he had a successful career. That's why he's a legend. And that's why, despite being angry and certainly vengeful and all that kind of stuff there at the end, he was able to move on with his life and go achieve something else. Most of these comic book pros today are not made out of the same material as Herb Trimpe. And that's unfortunate. But they can definitely learn a lesson from Herb and how to overcome these type of things and go out there and be a fully functioning adult, even when shit doesn't go your way. If you haven't had a chance to read the entire article, like I said, there's a link in the video description. Definitely read that thing, because Herb Trimpe was handing out life lessons left and right in that article. And I do appreciate, once again, Graham Nolan basically posting that on Twitter, because I hadn't read that before. And I found it very, very relatable and very, very inspirational. If you'd like more comic book talk about the current state of the comic book industry, which apparently looks a lot like the old state of the comic book industry, just dying a death by 1,000 paper cuts, definitely check out Thinking Critical Patreon. We got 8 hours of new podcasts talking about comic books and pop culture every single week on the Patreon. There's a link in the video description. All your favorite guests are there with the best conversations about comic books that you can possibly imagine.